Hello everyone, my name is Christopher Liam Rose. I'm an author, mentor, life coach, motivational speaker, evangelist, musician, and activist. Now, this is going to be the second audio for My Life is Like a Story Volume 3. And this becomes one of the most important topics to talk about and discuss. So this audio is called Spiritual Change, the Unknown. Now, I want to get a message across in the very beginning of this audio, right? Now, like I said in the previous audio, the self is where the suffering, pains, and adversities are in life. If you live for the self, the I, the me, I, my mentality, then you can never go through a process of spiritual change. So what is spiritual change? Spiritual change is a change within the psyche and the psychological mind. If you don't change your psyche and your psychological mind as a human being, then you'll live for the self, the I, the me, my, and I, which is very destructive, very negative, right? Now, I'm not telling people that it's going to be an easy journey, because spiritual change is not an easy journey. It's a very difficult journey to go down, and it takes, suffering, pain, and adversity to really understand it. But what I'm trying to encourage the listeners and the viewers in this audio is that you must go through a process of spiritual change. If you don't go through a process of spiritual change, then no matter what you do in your life, you could be successful, you could be well off, you could have a family. That's all going to involve around the self and the I. It's not going to evolve around the spiritual change. So how do you do the spiritual change, which is the question? The way to spiritually change is to do the 5 spiritual practices. You've got to do 5 spiritual practices to spiritual change. What are the 5 spiritual practices? Prayer, meditation, mindfulness, walking, and journaling. So there's 5 spiritual practices that you need to do to go through a process of spiritual change. If you don't go through the 5 spiritual practices within your life, and I don't say to the viewers and the listeners, it's going to be easy to do that. Sometimes it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of discipline, it takes a lot of time to discover what spiritual practices work for you. But the important thing about the spiritual change is that you need to develop a spiritual practice. If you don't develop a spiritual practice, how would you learn about the spiritual change that you need to go through? Spiritual change helps you to discover yourself as a human being. It helps you to discover your talents, your gifts, the no self, selflessness, and basically your spiritual life purpose and your spiritual calling. If you don't go through a process of spiritual change in your life, you will continue to live in suffering, pain, and adversities, and that will destroy your life. Like I said before, the suffering, pains, and adversities is all to do with the self and I. It's not to do with spiritual change. It's not to do with the no self and the no I. So what Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha is trying to get humanity to do, and it's very rare to find human beings that will go through a spiritual change, but what Jesus Christ, Jehovah, and Buddha is trying to ask humanity to do, and it's very important we do this, is go through a spiritual change and go through the unknown. We don't know how our lives are going to be. We don't know what relationship we're going to have. We don't know if we're going to be married or have a relationship or have children. We don't know if we're going to be working in employment or working in jobs. We don't know how our living situation is going to be, how our circumstances are going to be. We have no idea, because life is always moving into the future, so you learn different things about life along the journey. But what I'm trying to encourage in this audio and in this message, you need to go through a process of spiritual change. The spiritual change will help you to discover who you are as a human being. If you don't discover who you are as a human being, which is the know thyself, which is a very important spiritual sort of like a philosophy and spirituality and faith within spiritual communities and religion. If you don't go through the process of spiritual change, which is basically the 5 spiritual practices, you do the 5 spiritual practices: prayer, meditation, mindfulness, walking, journaling, understand yourself as a human being when you go through the process of the 5 spiritual practices. And then the spiritual change will come. And when you have the spiritual change, this will be the light that's within yourself. Each human being has a light that's within themselves, but we have to discover what it is. Some people will go through severe suffering, losing, sacrificing, suffering, even sometimes, dying and going through the loss of life and the loss of things. But sometimes throughout that pain, that suffering, that adversities you go through, you find the light within yourself. And a human being can't tell you what the light is. They can encourage you, they can motivate you, they can inspire you. But each human being has to find it out for themselves, and that is how life is. So you have to go through a process of spiritual change to find it within yourself. If you don't go through a process of spiritual change to find it within yourself, it means you live the self, the I. And if you live the I, me, my sort of life, then you can never discover the no self. And what Jesus Christ and Jehovah and Buddha is trying to encourage us to really do is spiritually change. If we spiritually change, our life spiritually changes. If our life spiritually changes, our thoughts spiritually change. If our thoughts spiritually change, then our thinking spiritually changes. If our thinking spiritually change, then our beliefs spiritually change. If our beliefs spiritually change, then our actions will spiritually change. So the message of what I'm trying to get across right now is go through a process of spiritual change. The spiritual change will help you to discover who you are as a human being. Find your gifts, find your talents, find your skills, find your spiritual life purpose and your spiritual calling. But you must do the 5 spiritual practices in order to discover who you are. Without the 5 spiritual practices, and it needs to be done daily, you can't just not do the 5 spiritual practices. If you have to do it daily, it's something you need to do daily. So my encouragement is do the 5 spiritual practices daily. Find time to do it. Prayer, meditation, mindfulness, walking, journaling, and then go through the process of spiritual change. If you go through the process of spiritual change, then you discover the light within yourself. And if you discover the light within yourself, then you discover no self and selflessness, which we're going to discuss in the final audio of this series. So thank you for listening now. I hope you go through a process of spiritual change, and take care now. Bye now. Thanks.